Welcome to the Virtual Excellence Show, where we speak with amazing people about all things virtual. Today we'll be talking with Jenna Owsianik, who is the editor of futureofsex.net, and we'll just come back and introduce her properly in a moment. Look forward to an extremely interesting conversation today. So this is the Virtual Excellence Show. The idea is of building a community of those who are interested in all things virtual and how to do that better. Please do like the video if you like it and subscribe to our channel. That will help us to continue in creating useful content for everyone. We're trying to build some other resources on the vx.show, including all of our videos and other things as well, and some research. Use the hashtag on Twitter, #VXShow, and go to our Facebook group for some more extended conversations with some buildings and possibilities there. So thank you for being along on the journey. So today we have with us Jenna Owsianik, who's I've worked closely with for the last 6 years as the editor of futureofsex.net. I'm the publisher of the site, and she has deep experience both before that, during that, and today in all things in terms of the edge of sexuality, sex tech, and the future of sexuality. So please welcome Jenna Owsianik.
Hey Ross, thanks for having me.
Wonderful to have you on the show. So I suppose going back to, I think it'd be interesting to go back to the beginning. Before we'd even met, you were interested in the intersection of sexuality and technology, and so just interested, I suppose, a bit of the background for what, this space in your world.
Yeah, well, my background's in journalism, and I also studied gender and women's studies as my undergrad. So I had done, before meeting with you, I had done a lot of work with the gender space, and I'd also worked as a researcher on a show that never made it to air, but it was called The History of Sex. And so I had already had a lot of experience and knowledge about sexuality and gender issues, and not as much as technology until I met with you and we got together to improve and grow the Future of Sex site. So that's sort of like my trajectory was just kind of natural going into it. I wasn't really encouraged to focus on sexuality or gender growing up or in school or anywhere really. So I think it worked out well. So I'm glad that we kind of met each other. I think it was a strange way that I found Future of Sex, but I did. So yeah, it's really been great growing the site and just learning so much about how people are using technology to solve issues, to connect, and maintain intimacy.
Absolutely. So, of course, the intersection of sexuality and technology is a pretty deep and broad space, but on the website we have two categories, remote sex and virtual sex, and those point to, I suppose, this idea of, you can be intimate at a distance, so that's part of that remote or virtual piece, and obviously using avatars or representations of yourself in other worlds. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about those spaces and what they mean.
Yeah, of course. I think virtual sex is probably a more commonly known type of sex. It doesn't necessarily have to involve virtual worlds with avatars in it. It could just be video chat using some type of communication device to interact sexually or erotically. Sometimes people will say that texting is a type of virtual sex. On our site, we'll usually kind of look more at the cutting edge, newer technologies and look at video calls and more so being able to meet people and avatars in virtual worlds and connect, sort of like The Sims or Second Life, but sexual. So virtual sex is using some type of digital communication device to connect sexually. And then we have remote sex, which is becoming a bit more well known. I would say it's often referred to as teledildonics, or I'll call it long distance sex. So that's really the physical aspect of it, right? So in virtual worlds, or when you're texting or having video calls, there's not necessarily any physical stimulation going on unless it's just one-sided, right? So the remote sex is really using internet-connected devices to send and receive touch. So there's haptic feedback involved, and it's getting a bit more popular and a lot more, I guess, media play, because right now people are having to be socially distant and not dating like they used to. We're having to stay in.
So there's obviously, these things are not new. They have quite a history to them, I believe.
Yes, yeah. So if you want to show, I have brought some pictures to give you. Basically, the idea of remote sex isn't new. These photos here, you'll see one on the left is from Future Sex magazine from the early 90s. And that's just like an artistic rendering of what these type of teledildonic or remote sex suits could do by, that one's attached to virtual reality. The idea is that it would be attached to virtual reality, and then that gear around the bodies is what it would be to send and receive touch. So that's just artistic, but it was pretty exciting magazine at the time. Nothing has really come out of that design. But if you look at the maybe it's your left, but if you look at the one with a mask on a mannequin, the whole suit, that's from a virtual reality and a remote sex project from about 1993 called Cyber SM. So it used virtual reality and haptics to have some type of immersive remote sexual experience. And that was between, I think, Germany and France. So, you could be, having a remote sex experience with somebody that's next door, or they could be a world away, as long as there's some type of, as long as there's internet involved. But yeah, those projects were for the 90s, but we've really not had the progress in terms of touch and the sending and receiving of touch for it to get really mainstream, I don't think. And whereas there are sex toys that really focus on the genitals and they can be fun and exciting, especially if you're in a long distance relationship, they're low fidelity in terms of, what the whole human body is capable of sending and receiving and what it can do. So it will be exciting as more developments come in terms of haptics.
So, just before we get to the haptics piece, so I suppose there's, we want kind of remote intimacy. So as you say, there's a lot of these are focused on genitals, which comes from the teledildonics, which Howard Rheingold on the first episode of the show told us about how he came up with the word. But some of the other things which I think are interesting today are in terms of sensors. So remote hand holding or hug pillows or other things like that. So this is not all about the raw sexuality of it. It's around remote connection and intimacy. So where are we up to with that? Are people using these things? What's available? Yeah,
there's some jewelry that's fun, like in terms of bracelets. So they can be a little bit expensive, and there's different products have gotten better or worse reviews, right? I think it is nice in terms of the connections. I'm not sure how popular they are right now, because there is usually a price tag on these items of about at least $100 or $200. And you have the money to spend. I think it's a nice way to, you can use a device that will send your lover's heartbeat so you can feel it. And that might be kind of reassuring to you. Or there's heartbeat pillows. Yeah, and then there's Wearables, but I'm not sure it went anywhere. It's the hand holding,
yes.
The long distance hand holding. So it hasn't really gone anywhere. I don't think it's really made it to market. So I'd like to know what happened to that. And there's also been some long distance kissing projects, a lot of them. Well, not a lot, but there's been ongoing. I think there's been about 2 or 3 that we've covered. But it's ongoing, trying to send these long. I think it's kind of it feels a bit peculiar to people. It's not quite there yet, and I think humans, we're not quite there. There's that things could change as we're in our socially distant world. We're being kind of pushed to use technology, and we're realizing that it's not as scary as we thought. Like my mother cashing a check on her mobile phone, oh, that was really great. It made my life so much easier. But there's that a little bit of that hesitation to try it. So I think there's some fun items out there. There are friendship lamps where you can control the light of the lamp that there's one that your friend has and one that you have. And I think it's, they're nice for terms of sending intimacy and another form of connection as well. But they can be a bit pricey in terms of objects that you may or may not need, and in terms of what they can actually deliver.
Yeah. That's part of the idea. The concept is great, as in connecting at a distance, but because it is such a human thing, it is pretty hard to embed in technology.
Yeah, definitely.
So, but before we get to just going back to the haptics and I suppose the future things, I just want to come back to the virtual sex piece in terms of avatars and so on, because that's a lot of what people find through futureofsex.net is various things for where you have avatars of yourselves, you can play different places. There's Red Light Center, 3DX Chat. What are some of the other ones?
Yeah, there's Red Light Center, 3DX Chat, Ureal. In terms of virtual, there's a lot of one-person sex simulators out there that are popular as well. And there's even some X-rated sort of add-ons you can get in Second Life to erotify your Second Life experience. And a few of these games have the ability to integrate with the remote sex devices that I was talking about earlier. So what's interesting as technology gets better, and most importantly, I think internet speeds and latency improve, that we're going to be seeing more and more of these devices being used. However, right now there's a bit of a lag time, especially with interaction with the 3D world. So it's not quite there, but what's so great about the 3D worlds is that people are able to go in there and create a persona, and it's not deceptive. Everyone knows that you're an avatar, not necessarily the same person behind it, but it's to sort of explore avenues that you may not be so willing to explore with someone in the flesh, because maybe you're just not comfortable yet. Maybe you live in a place you're socially isolated, or you live in a very conservative place. And what I'm hoping is that more people who might feel isolated may be able to go into these virtual worlds and meet people. And in our Future of Sex report, I think we actually said that by 2022 we had expected that first dates in virtual worlds would become popular. And so I think that, we've seen Facebook with virtual reality, dating kind of go out there. I think that as we continue on in this path of socially distancing, that'll probably, be an interesting option to do, go into these virtual worlds and, have first dates. I know there is some type of, I forget the name of it right now, but there is like a way to watch a movie with your friends and then have a VR headset on and sort of interact. So, that we're already kind of there where, if you wanted to go on a date with somebody and watch the same movie, there's technology out there that you can watch it at the same time, and then, or maybe have some avatars where you can interact and kind of see virtual versions of yourself.
Yes, Yeah, so on that point, the VR generally has not gone as fast as I or many other people have expected. It's still progressing, but pretty slowly. But it's just one of those very obvious applications, and you'd think one of the ones which would take it further. So, while we do need more people to have VR headsets, but it is being able to, as you say, just date. This is the whole spectrum of how we connect. And dating is really even more compelling than sort of taking things further necessarily. As you say, that's also a place where people can explore more of themselves. I think that's generally one of the positive aspects of technology and sexuality, is that offering ways to discover more about yourself and who you are, and certainly those avatar-based ones are important. So, this starts to get us. So, as you mentioned, we created the Future of Sex report a while ago with including a number of predictions. I think it's interesting to think, all right, well, where does that go in terms of our avatars for intimate connection, and being able to, for example, use body capture, motion capture to show our bodies, facial expression capture to be able to express that on avatars. I mean, do you have any thoughts on where that might get to?
Yeah, well, right now we have places like Red Light Center where they do motion capture of adult performers to make it so that the in-game graphics look realistic. But, outside of like sex, the world of sex and where we're going, there's been some projects to create telepresence avatars, so non-sexual based, but to offer services like medical services and connect with people. So, for example, there's the X Prize for the Anna avatar, and that's still in progress. There's a $10 million prize to create this. And so as we see more and more projects come out that are working in these, remote connection spaces, not just sex, we're going to be able to incorporate that more. So I think right now it's just really interesting in terms of the coronavirus. We've had these predictions, and I think some of them are coming to fruition as we'd expected, but others I think might speed up a bit more just because we don't know how the next couple of years are going to play out. It's likely we're going to be, socially distancing for quite a while. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops. And, 5G could really be a big game changer in terms of making it so that, better connection speed, slower lag time, and, really changing the future of sex in terms of, making it accessible and, not such, making it so technology sort of has that seamless effect. Like I'm sometimes with, so for example, like virtual reality porn, just the process of, downloading the videos or making sure your computer and headset is all working. Kind of reminds me of the Seinfeld episode where George Costanza's, trying to tear open a condom wrapper and he can't, and then he's just out of the mood completely. And, right now that sometimes, or it can often happen with these new technologies we're using. It can be a bit of a pain to get it set up, or, there's a glitch and then you just kind of, you just don't want to keep going, or you gotta, get back to it later. So, as these new technologies are out and the internet is still not quite as fast to make them go to their full potential. It'll be exciting to see if we can get these predictions happening sooner.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've been talking a bit lately around future of dating, or dating in a coronavirus times, I suppose. And one of the implications is that dating apps are now being used to set up virtual dates to start off, as opposed to in-person dates, as people become a little more cautious and a little slower to actually meet people face to face.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think, what's becoming popular is speed dating, virtual speed dating. I've heard of some apps putting that forward, and I think that's kind of great. And I forget what podcast I was listening to. I think it was Sex with Emily, and someone was saying, well, isn't that great? We can, we don't have to go all the way downtown and, spend all this time getting ready and whatever to leave. We can just do it in our own home and see if you connect with anybody. Like, dating can be a lot of work. It's not always fun. And so I think that's kind of exciting. You can kind of tell already, right? Whether or not there's there's not that same, I might even feel safer, right? In terms of not necessarily, if if the coronavirus weren't here, even if that weren't an issue, it can kind of feel a bit safer. That said, with strangers, I remember a guy dating on a dating app wanted to call me on the phone, and I was kind of like surprised. This was a few months ago, just because that's so, I don't know, it's so old now, and people don't. I was very impressed that he wanted to call, but it's just sort of like, this doesn't happen. Like in high school, you would know if someone liked you or had a crush on you because they had to call your home. Like they had to call your home, and most likely they had to talk through your parents or your sister or something.
Yeah, right.
Now it's just so easy to send up a text and just to kind of have conversations that may or may not have a lot of substance to them, that it's kind of exciting that we have someone on call. So I think with the video, you might be able to create a better connection in terms or in comparison to these conversations that may not go anywhere. And so if you can connect on the different level where you're actually, seeing someone, and while you can't smell them or touch them, you can get that body language that so much of communication is about. So I think that it's interesting times that we're in, because we're kind of going back to courtship, kind of going back to getting to know each other. And video calling is great in terms of, making sure you're not getting catfished as well, because especially if you're not going to meet anybody right away, you want to know that who you're talking to is who you're talking to, right? And so it's great that Tinder has added a feature as well to make it so you need to take some photos of yourself to prove that your photos are on your profile are you. So we have some of these apps kind of changing, with the video call date options, and having some changes to do with Black Lives Matter, and also, as we just said, with the other options. So it's interesting because dating apps have really gotten a lot of more users on them, but we have to find a way to maintain the intimacy and the connection without getting in person. And I feel for the people who are very touch oriented and who, one of the love languages is touch. And if some people feel connections that way, it's unfortunate, but it's like we have to try to use different senses to get the connection we otherwise might, prefer with touch.
Yes, absolutely. This goes to part of the point of futureofsex.net in terms of saying this gives us more options. Technology allows us to connect, to give pleasure to each other in ways that we didn't have before. It doesn't take away from the old way. So it's not replacing, it's adding. And so as long as we have that attitude, well, here's another possibility. Do I like it? Yes, no, then that's got to be a good thing. So
yeah, I was going to say, it's always good to be mindful of what you're using, right? How many of us have our phone and we check it constantly, and it's not good for you. People get anxious, right? So, we can use dating apps to your benefit, but, if you're or you can just overdo it and maybe not get a great experience. So it's like,
yes.
If you're thinking about how you're using something, how you're consuming media, I think that's the key, right? It's not like this, this type of technology is going to be so great for everyone, or it's going to be terrible. It's like, how are you using it? Are you using it to better your life in the world? Do you understand, right, how it's affecting you? Or are you just, mindlessly going through the motions, as I often do with just checking my emails when I'm bored, right? That go-to, right?
Yeah. Because
that's what people do sometimes when they're bored. They go on the dating app, but I don't know if you're necessarily going to find the greatest connection if you're going on just because you're bored, or, if you're, looking for a type of connection.
Yeah, well, that comes back to our attitudes, well, to life generally, and also in technology. And there's some, I think, life skills involved, not just in the dating and the apps, as you mentioned, but also to how it is we use technology, and it can be a bit of a rabbit hole. So you started talking about touch then, and I suppose that's one of the next frontiers where, yes, we have teledildonics, yes, they've got a number of things where we can connect for the act of sex at a distance. But wanting to really get beyond that, there's a desire for touch. It's a very human desire, and that is part of the experience of connection. It doesn't even need to be sexual. So where are we, and where might we get to with this?
Yeah, well, there's one exciting project called the Tesla suit. I shared a photo with you before. And way back, and I think it was 2015, the folks behind Tesla suit, they released a video. Well, I should explain more about it. Basically, it's a haptic bodysuit, and you can see that someone is wearing a virtual reality headset, so it connects with that. And it can take motion, it can sense motion capture, and it's very much used in virtual reality and augmented reality simulations, particularly ones that would be kind of dangerous to do in real life, and you don't want to learn on the job that about this dangerous situation and how you might hurt yourself. You want to have sort of virtual simulated experience. But however, in 2015, their PR team put out a video of showing how this suit, how it can send and receive touch in a hug. They took it down soon after. I'm not sure why. Maybe they didn't want that type of PR out there about them, but that's really got, it's got me thinking in terms of the whole body and the touch. It's not, there's so much more than genital touch when we think about intimacy, and I suppose it makes sense that people have been, just trying to work with the sex toys. But when we get the whole body in there and the senses, and you can have a caress and a touch, I think that's when things get more exciting and becomes a bit more realistic. And yeah, so the Tesla suit is an exciting opportunity. I wish I had the video of the hug that they sent, but they took it down a while ago.
Yes, well, that's definitely the next frontier. There was also a news item on haptic skin recently.
Yeah, there was. I can't tell you a lot about that one, but what was that for? Was that in terms of robots?
Yes, I think it was robots? Essentially, the potential of it was that we can touch people at a distance, essentially, that it feels like somebody else's skin.
Oh, okay.
But, there's obviously commercial opportunities.
Creepy, the uncanny valley thing, you're like, oh, yeah.
Well,
right? It's Halloween-y, like the skin, but...
Well, that's right. The commercial, the uncanny valley, not just for sight, seeing robots that look very like humans, but not quite, but also touch. Maybe that's an interesting one as well. But that's, obviously the commercial opportunities of being able to touch at a distance are very strong. And another very important one actually is being able to feel clothes before you buy them. That's, again, lots of money in this, so I'm sure that, and there is lots of work being done. It's just a particularly tough thing to actually communicate touch at a distance.
Yeah. Wow. Cool. Yeah, that's interesting. You do want to know how something feels before you buy it, especially if you're buying like something expensive or that you're going to be wearing a lot. And wow. So yeah, hopefully they get more progress, because there's not much going on in the sex tech space in terms of haptics. Really.
Yeah. Well,
there is things, but there's not the money behind it like there is in terms of right, because. There is a lot of money to be made in sexual wellness and sex tech, but, the investing isn't always go the same way. It doesn't always have the same backers as other enterprises.
Yeah, we'll get there. So as you mentioned, you and I authored a Future of Sex report a little while back. And if you're watching this and you'd like to find that, just go to futureofsex.net, which of course has all the resources we've been talking about anyway. I think it's scroll down on the right-hand column. There's a link to the Future of Sex report, in which we give say what each of the aspects of the future of sex are. Look at the current state and where they're going in terms of remote sex, virtual sex, augmentation, virtual immersive entertainment, and so on. But in that we had some very interesting conversations about predicting the future. When trying to pick a date and when things would happen. So do you have any particular reflections now on any of the things we are on track or not on track, or ways in which
Yeah.
we should be seeing insights into where things are going in there?
Yeah, well, I think one of them is, I think some have definitely made it. Like we have one that basically I think it's already happened. We said that in 2033, adult performers and some celebrities will sell robotic replicas of themselves. So, I mean, we already have that actually. I think when we were saying that, we were thinking that they would be much more advanced. Basically, the sex robots that we're seeing, the ones that are replicas of adult stars, it's just the head that's robotic. And I mean, it's quite impressive, but it's not a full moving humanoid. So in a way, we kind of have it, but we don't really have that, sex robot that you would think you would see in, AI with a Gigolo Joe that looks just like a human, acts just like a human. And let me think about other. I think with robots, I think that's interesting because I don't know if people mean it. They're in sex dolls, like they cost a lot. The lower end ones will cost you like $1,000. So I mean, it's pricey, but with people being alone, I'm just hearing more about people considering getting a sex doll, not just because they don't have a partner around and they're thinking, maybe it would be interesting. So we had thought that by 2045, 1 in 10 young adults would have had sex with a humanoid robot. So, I mean, 2045, will there or will there not be humanoid sex robots? I think other people have had similar predictions in terms of there being humanoid robots at some point. There's going to be arguments about how realistic they actually are. But I think in terms of, whatever robotic sex dolls are out there, I think we're very much on track for having that. And even if not because people want to, because that's their sexual preference, they just wanted to have sex with a robot, but because they want to try the technology. So I would still say that we're there. I think some of our trickier ones may have to do with human augmentation, because we have one where we said brain-to-brain interfaces will allow each other to stimulate each other directly to reach an orgasm. So I think that might have been a bit ambitious, maybe in terms of not brain-to-brain interfaces, but more, BCI technology. We have some progress in terms of one fellow named Leonardo Gomez. He has the neuro dildo, which is he's basically used, a BCI headset. And he trains it so that when he, thinks a certain way or focuses a certain way, that a dildo will respond. So, I mean, there's that can happen. Maybe that's a better one to say for 2027 than the brain-to-brain interfaces.
Yeah, well, there's two parts to a lot of these technologies. One is the technological advances, and the other is the human social response to them, as to, well, is this something we actually want to push forward and drive investment, or pull back and say, no, that's not so good. So I think one of the other predictions was in 2028 that a quarter of young adults would have had a long-distance sexual experience. Let's see, that's 8 years away.
Pardon?
That's 8 years away now. I think it's well possible.
Yeah, I mean, in what is long, we had that under remote sex. So there is we're assuming there's a long distance, some type of remote sex toy involved. I don't think, that's that far off. We're seeing, a lot, especially in camming and more in adult entertainment, we're seeing long distance sex toys become popular. That's usually where things kind of start off, is more on the adult entertainment side. And so it makes sense that people may get that experience with camming and whatnot. But then, there is still interest in long distance relationships and using the long distance sex products for that. So I think 8 years away, a quarter of young people having had a long distance sex experience. I think, if we think about, what countries we're looking at, maybe the more developed countries, of course, where, there's more disposable income to, buy more expensive products. I don't think we're that far off. And I think remote sex has been a bit held back by the old patent covering remote sex technology.
Right.
It's pretty broad. and people were very much scared of getting sued. So it was a 20-year patent that expired in 2018. So that was only 2 years ago. It's sort of a question is, has remote sex in terms of haptics not come that far because the technology isn't there, people weren't able to really develop in this area? Or is it just something that, we're not that interested in, right? It's maybe not something we want to do. We'll see now with COVID as things have changed. We're looking for new ways to connect and maintain intimacy. What do you think about 2028?
Well, if you come back to some of that can be very simple things, such as app-controlled vibrators. And that's, it's sort of thing where anything which is a vibrator, it doesn't cost much now or in the future to make it app-controlled. In a way, everything becomes app-controlled. If you can do a local app, then you can do it with a remote app. So it becomes it's almost a trivial thing. So in terms of, you get some complex, expensive equipment and setup, then yes, there's a minority of people are going to be doing something. But if it's just being able to stimulate at a distance, then that's, I think we're well on track for that.
And what are you talking about? You mean, at a distance, is that you're out at dinner with someone and someone has a sex toy in their underwear and then the other person is controlling it from across the table?
Yep.
Because anecdotally, I hear that's fairly popular, right? So, then we're already there, right? Because those are app controlled. There are ones that are remote and they don't work if you aren't connected to the internet. But I think it's already happening. And then if we break it down, if they're not necessarily having to be, in a whole other country.
This is all about connection. So this is, I suppose, being a little introduction to remote sex and virtual sex and your journey in it. Anything else? Actually, you also have another project, Sex for Everybody, and just I think that's related, and I'd like to hear about that as well.
Yeah, sure. So I have another site that I work on called sexforeverybody.com. So basically it's intended to make sex education resources accessible for people who may have disabilities or some type of trauma. And so it's just sort of like a safe area where you might get little different resources that you might not otherwise, right? So I really enjoy how it's got a lot of traction. Actually, I don't update it a lot, but there's just a lot of people who have disabilities or people who are able-bodied who have trauma. It's just the thought of enjoying sexuality or even just getting the resources, they just aren't there. And so it's been rewarding getting into this because there's just such a need.
And so anything else think you want to share on the Virtual Excellence Show about virtual, not just sex and dating, but anything else which you think is people would get value from? I think it's just, doing what works for you and experimenting. And, it's not that any of these one things are going to be great or bad for everybody. But I think, like what you said, it's just, seeing what works for you. And when we're talking about this, how people are connecting after, with lockdown, not everybody has a sex drive because they're anxious. Some people don't enjoy sex or asexual anyways, and some people, their sex drives are higher. So, this isn't about, everyone should be a certain way or like a certain thing. But I just wanted to have that context in mind when we're talking about sexuality and avenues. Yeah, absolutely. And so the tagline of Future of Sex, if I remember rightly, is how technology is augmenting human sexuality, or words to that effect.
Exactly.
And so these are new possibilities. We can treat them in good ways. Maybe we can treat them in bad ways, but these are possibilities, and we have to treat them as an expansion of who we can be.
Exactly.
So thank you so much, Jenna, for being on the show and sharing all of that. So If you want more about Future of Sex and all the things we're talking about, go to futureofsex.net. We claim it's the world's leading publication on the intersection of sexuality and technology, and probably I think that's a pretty fair claim. And certainly we certainly try to share the best resource we can. So thank you, Jenna. I really appreciate it, and wonderful to have you on the show.
Thanks, Rath. Yeah, it's great talking to you.
So, well, that was a bit of a different topic, virtual and remote, in this case in terms of human connection. So please, if you enjoyed the show, like the video, subscribe to YouTube if you haven't already. We've got lots of resources at thevx.show and using the hashtag #VXShow on Twitter, and building conversations at the Facebook group VX Show. Thanks so much for being on the show. It's been a real pleasure to have you. Have a lovely day.